Hi, it's Scott Sloan back at it Friday morning, finally here on the Big One 700 WLW. Yesterday on the show, I had my friend, City Commissioner, City of Covington, Stephen Frank on, and the White House said that the reason why the Brent Spence Bridge is not going to get built is because of Stephen Frank. It's Kentucky's, it's Stephen Frank's fault. So when you got the White House, when you have Republicans and other Democrats, when you have chambers of commerce, when you have big business pointing the finger at one guy going, it's not us, it's you. You'd think normally you'd go, well, maybe I pause for concern. But Stephen Frank, God bless him, thinks he's the smartest man in the room, that he's right about everything. It's kind of like your ex-wife. Now, in studio this morning here is Mark Policinski, of course. He is the Grand Poobah of OKI. And I guess in the interest of fair time, I wanted to bring Mark in to give us an idea of the Brent Spence Bridge, the project itself. I blame Steve Frank for the failings of the Brent Spence Bridge. How about you?
I don't blame Steve individually. Steve is in a voice of the lack of wisdom for a while, but he's not the only one. But the simple fact is that I think people are realizing that Steve is running out of arguments. You know, they started with that there were going to be toll booths on the Brent Spence, the new bridge, and that's not true. Then they said the federal government was going to pay for the bridge. They've been saying that for 2 years, and in those 2 years, the federal government's gone another $1 trillion into debt. Mm-hmm. You know, they then said that public-private partnerships is the way to reduce the cost of this bridge by 20 to 25%. They don't work. Well, they've been working for half a century. Then they said, how
about the banks? How's the banks doing?
The banks do great. That's a public-private partnership, isn't it now? Then they said tolls are going to be $6 or $12, and that's not true. We're aiming for $1. They said that was irrational. Louisville would never come in at $1. And just this week, yes, Louisville announced that the toll for commuters with transponders is going to be $1.
What?
That's right.
Because I was told it would be like $100 a foot to cross the bridge, and that's just each way.
And you have 2 feet, too.
Yes, yeah. So, wow. So it's not coming out to fruition. But I get it. Stephen Frank, and he is a great representative for the people he represents, of course, which would be the city of Covington. And much like Route 66, when Eisenhower started building federal highways, right? How's Route 66? It's nostalgic, but there's a lot of boarded-up old buildings along Route 66 because we're on the highways now. And I think the fear is true when it comes to the city of Covington, that they look at it and go, hey, if this thing comes in, it's going to bypass us. Is it going to kill business? Will it kill business in Covington?
Well, you got to remember that this project for years has sought the advice and counsel of the city of Covington. As a matter of fact, the original plans were that were put in for how those exits would affect Covington. When they were put in with Covington's input. Then Covington, much to its credit, said that they didn't like the way those exits were constructed, and so there were modifications made. So everybody is aware of the concerns that Covington has, and they've made every effort to address them.
Which is legitimate. Now, the battle that we got into is this. It's Stephen Frank, he wants to rework 71, 75 from south, right, and bring that back around to 275. And he said there's nothing but fields covered with dandelions there and unicorns and rainbows, which will be displaced. And that you just build a stretch of highway, and that the real problem is congestion. And I think he's right. The real problem is that we have 71, 75 merging. You know, look at the downtown if you're heading south, right? Everything goes into the tunnel and then around, and then, you know, you break off to Dayton, and then the bridge on the way back, of course, is frightening because it's, you know, cantilevered. You got to change lanes immediately. But it's all that congestion 71, 75. When you talk about congestion, does the bridge relieve congestion, or is it just ease it for as long as you're over the top of the Ohio River?
No, it relieves congestion because, remember, the project is not just the bridge. It's 8 miles of project, 5 into Kentucky and 3 roughly into Ohio. So you relieve congestion, you move traffic, you allow it to disperse more easily, you get rid of weaving, dangerous weaving and things like that. So it really isn't just to relieve congestion at the bridge. It's to relieve congestion, improve what they call throughput, for an 8-mile corridor.
Okay. What about the other one is Cutting a Hill? There's not much you can do there. It's on the one side you have development and old buildings. On the other side you've got a mountain. There's not much you can do with the Cutting a Hill.
But there are things you can do, and that's why we're backing up 5 miles into Kentucky so that you can make egress and ingress easier to do. This idea of building a new road, which you touched on, The one
that talk about that, because he says for the same amount of money or less, you'll be able to acquire all that land, do all of the due diligence, do all of the environmental requirements, studies and the like, and then get that done with about the same price it would be to do what you're talking about in this 8-mile stretch, including a new Brent Spence Bridge.
That's as false as his argument that the bridge is safe. The simple fact is, if you extend 471 and then you connect it someplace south of the 71, 75 come together, what happens is, and I've been told this by the engineers at KYTC, as you cross, at 471, you move into Kentucky, the first casualty is going to be Northern Kentucky University. Okay. Because you're going to build a major interstate highway which goes right through it. Then as you swing through the southern portions of these counties, particularly Kenton, these folks don't want a major interstate highway going through their yards.
Well, they don't care because it's all dandelion fields. Is all.
Well, they do care because it's their dandelions, it's their businesses, it's their homes. And here's the really crazy part of this. When he says that they can do this for less, the estimate by KYTC is $4 billion. Unlike the Brent Spence Bridge, where the cost of the bridge is shared by Ohioans and Kentuckians, all $4 billion would fall on Kentuckians.
Right.
So it's another bad idea.
That's a good point right there. It's the fact that Kentucky, and the overall thing is, let's say it's dandelion fields and you don't have things like eminent domain and property acquirement and restrictions and that stuff, airspace and a whole bunch of other things, which I think the Bengals own the airspace over the area we're talking about. Anyway, Mark Policinski, the money's got to come from where? If you're going to do all this stuff, right? We have no earmarks. We have declining gas tax revenues, which is why we're in this mess in the first place. And we have no money coming in from Frankfurt for the project in Kentucky, and maybe a little bit from Columbus. But if you're still talking about building stuff, the issue is money. Where's the money coming from?
It's always been money, and that's the idea is when folks say that they're against tolls, fine. What is the alternative? And we've been waiting for 2.5 years for an alternative. There is none. So what it constantly happens is they keep on bringing up these really weird ideas, like there'll be toll booths, like the bridge is safe, like the tolls will be $6.
Right.
I mean, it's just showing that they're running out of arguments. And I think when they said the bridge is safe, I think that was a turning point as far as their credibility goes, because people know that it's not safe. And now this
he'll say it's safe because you keep saying it's not safe. And I'm looking at this.
Yeah, but we have concrete falling from the top to the bottom.
That's what I said. We got guys getting. What do you think that poor guy who got knocked off the side of the bridge because there's no breakdown lane there, was his last thoughts were when his head hit the Ohio River? It wasn't of his family. You think it was about whether or not we should build a 20-mile extension around 71, 75. He's thinking this damn bridge claimed another life. That's what the poor guy was thinking.
That's exactly right. And the problem is that when you have cars falling from the upper deck to the lower deck, and narrowly missing somehow. I mean, people then say, well, the bridge is safe. It's not safe. And I think that was a real turning point to really show the lack of credibility that the folks have.
Well, one of the other arguments, and again, Mark Policinski from OKI, we're talking about the Brent Spence Bridge. Stephen Frank was on yesterday. You can catch on the podcast. It was a really good discussion. I like Steve. But the fact of the matter is that this rating of this bridge back in 2006 was a B+. Last year, for the full year that we have, was already a C-. So if you kind of just figure this out, this thing will be at a failing or worse by, in 7 years?
Easily.
And we've been debating the merits of building a new bridge for 13 years. So almost twice that we've been talking about it, and in 7 years, we're going to go to a failing state, which means what? Well,
the whole point is that not only is the bridge unsafe, but OKI, we have a travel demand model, shows what happens to traffic. And basically, if we don't move to build a bridge, it's not just that the 75-71 corridor shuts down, it's that 275 shuts down, 71 shuts down, because the corridor, the 75 corridor, is such an important part of our region. Again, if that gets backed up, you've got to remember 75% of all the jobs in this region, 1 million jobs in this region, 75% of them are within 5 miles of that corridor.
Right.
So as it backs up, it affects everybody trying to get to and from that corridor. So we've got a window to move here, and that's the thing. We've got to really get serious about getting this done, because if this slips and we walk into a new Congress, a new presidential cycle, and then 2 or 3 years after that get their act together. The simple fact is that we'll be 10 years down the road and we still won't have a damn.
Well, the thing is too, it doesn't mean that his idea is a bad one. It just seems like the priorities are backwards. Is the bridge is more clear and imminent danger, and you fix that first, and then let's address the issue of 71, 75, and kind of splitting things up a little further down the road in Kentucky, and maybe looking at that issue where you can extend the highway. Because if it takes 13 years to just talk about redoing a bridge that's already there, how long do you think it's going to take for us to talk about building a new stretch of a major interstate highway? So let's get this done, and then you guys, you and Steve, people like Steve and Frank, get together and say, okay, let's address this issue about extending 75 the way it should be instead of 71, 75. Isn't that fair?
Well, the point is, and we hope that by building a new bridge, and it's our hope, is that you do relieve enough congestion on 71, 75, right, the whole corridor. Mm-hmm. It's not a piecemeal solution. It's a rather grand solution. Again, it's 8 miles long. So the whole point is as you improve access, as you improve the ability to get off and on more easily, you're going to solve a lot of the congestion problems. That's the whole point of this. And so you don't have to turn to $4 billion solutions that are only borne by the taxpayers in Kentucky and run through people's backyards. I mean, when this idea was first brought up, it was 30 years ago when it was first brought up, and it was rejected then. Now imagine all the development, the homes, the businesses that are out there. And now you're going to walk back there and say, I'm sorry, folks, everything you've built in the last 30 years, it's gone.
Right. And I'm with you on this one. To me, it's a no-brainer. It's getting it done. And I'm convinced it's all about that one exit in Covington to get people on the northbound lane. And if you skip that and take those exits out of there, or the one near Cork and Bottle, right, that's what Stephen Frank's worried about. He's worried about the city of Covington. Meanwhile, it's holding the rest of us hostage. And it's nothing against Covington. It's that their Waffle House is amazing. However, until we get flying cars, Mark, when are the flying cars coming? We don't have to talk about this.
2027.
Okay. So why don't we just not build anything and wait for 2027, let technology fix it? I'm with you on that one.
That's right. Well, let's just wait, and we'll have 15 more years of congestion and deaths and lack of safety and wasted gas and wasted time. And by the way, while we're stuck here in the mud of these phony arguments, Louisville is building 2 bridges. They're charging $1 for their toll. Right. And guess what? They're already experiencing businesses that are gravitating towards that improved.
What about the bankruptcy of the Indiana the Indiana Turnpike? You hear, okay, here's a private-public partnership. They put this thing in, and now they're bankrupt, and they're bankrupt here and there and everywhere. When that argument's brought forward, how do you respond?
What's the argument? The fact that it went bankrupt? It did go bankrupt. Okay. So what's the impact to the state, to the taxpayers?
Still have a road, right?
Well, not only have the road, but Indiana got to keep its money. It got $3.6 billion. So it got to keep its money. There's going to be, as I understand it, there'll be an auction, and it'll go to somebody else, and they'll run it. What happens when you have a bankruptcy is that folks on the other side say that all public-private partnerships go bankrupt, and that's not true. Every public-private partnership deal is a separate deal. When I was in the private sector and we were acquiring a company, we made good deals and we made bad deals.
Right.
It's all in the art of the deal. And so because we've had decades now of public-private partnerships in this country being used to build infrastructure, we know more about how to construct them, how to do them. And consequently, a public-private partnership is something you really have to investigate, particularly when it comes to the fact that a public-private partnership could save 20-25% of the cost of this bridge. Think about how much money that's $500 million.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's consider the amount of versus let's say the amount of money we lose in sitting in traffic and diversions and everything else. Right. And that's when we've got the big major players from both chambers of commerce are saying, "Look, build a damn bridge; it's costing us money." Those are the people you listen to.
Well, you're right. You listen to those folks, and then also you listen to the common person who says, I have to get to my job on the other side of the river, and I'm stuck in traffic an hour a day.
Yep, exactly. Mark, have a great weekend. Good holiday, too, for you, buddy. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate Mark Polositsky from OKI getting it done. So Brent Spence Bridge Project, now you've heard both sides, and now you can form your opinion in 3, 2, 1.